I guess we really did raise a naive daughter, my father said as he leaned back in his leather chair, the same one he'd lectured me from for most of my childhood. Your money's gone, Sienna. But look on the bright side. It's now securing Evan's future. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just laughed. Not because it was funny, because they thought they had one. You think you took everything, I said quietly, but you don't know what I've done. He looked at me then, eyebrows raised, not in fear but confusion. He had no idea. That's when I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the pivot, the part where the victim turns into the narrator. So let me take you back. Let me show you how we got here. I'm Sienna Brooks, I'm 29, and until last month, I was finally about to put a down payment on a house I'd been saving for over a decade. $390,000. 10 years. Gone in one transfer. Gone to the man who once told me women shouldn't worry about money. It makes them unlikable. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a 2-story colonial house with navy shutters and white pillars. Picture perfect on the outside. But inside, everything was about control. My mother, Teresa, was a former elementary school teacher who now taught life values through guilt and manipulation. My father, Stephen Brooks, ran a boutique financial advisory firm and ran our household like one of his client portfolios, measured, optimized, micromanaged. And then there was Evan, my younger brother, for years younger, but 20 steps ahead in their eyes. He was the golden boy. He could crash a car and get a better one the next day. I once lost my house key and was grounded for 2 weeks. That contrast pushed me to make one vow. I would build something that was entirely mine. No parental cosigns, no emotional strings, just my own hands, working toward my own future. And I did. From 16 to 29, I worked multiple jobs, took night classes, learned to code, ate ramen far longer than most adults should. I tracked every dollar, every cent. I lived like I was already broke, so that one day I could be free. I thought I had finally made it. I was weeks away from placing an offer on a house, a real house, with a garden and an office and a kitchen I could actually cook in. Jessica, my partner of 3 years, was already planning where the bookshelves would go. But then something strange happened. A slip, a mistake. At Sunday dinner, my father made a comment about the original oak cabinetry in the kitchen of the house I'd been looking at. The house I hadn't told them about. The comment caught me off guard. We were sitting at the dinner table. Same dark mahogany. Same chairs I wasn't allowed to lean back in as a child. My mother had just served her signature rosemary chicken when my father casually mentioned how beautiful the oak cabinetry looked in the listing photos of the Montrose Avenue house. I froze. I hadn't shared any photos. Not with them. Not online. Not even through email. Only Jessica, and I had visited it. Only Jessica had my plans. So how? I brushed it off with a nervous laugh. Did Jessica show you the listing? I asked, trying to sound casual. My father didn't miss a beat. Must have been in one of your calls. You know how your mother always has a good memory. But her eyes didn't meet mine. She was too busy cutting into her chicken. I felt it then, an itch under my skin. Something wasn't right. But that itch wasn't new. It had been there for as long as I could remember. When you grow up in a house like mine, you learn to silence instincts. To obey first, think later. I wasn't raised. I was managed. My bedtime wasn't 9 p.m. It was 8:43 for optimal sleep. My clothes were approved weekly. My friendships vetted. My reading material scanned for attitude shifts. At 13, I was grounded for refusing to join a church group. At 15, I cried myself to sleep when my mom took my journal and read it aloud to my dad over dinner. For my safety, she said. Meanwhile, Evan had a password-protected door by 16, a car by 17, and when he failed his math final, my father wrote an angry letter to the teacher demanding clarity in curriculum. Me, I once brought home a B plus in chemistry and lost phone privileges for a month. We're harder on you because we expect more from you, they'd say, their voices coated in parental righteousness. But the truth is they didn't expect more. They demanded more. More compliance. More obedience. More silence. Evan got support. I got surveillance. And that contrast became fuel. I got my first job at 16, part-time cashier at a bakery downtown. I'd hide my tips in an old Harry Potter book I hollowed out with a knife. It felt like rebellion, like resistance. It felt like survival. At 18, I was accepted into a community college. I didn't ask for help. I paid the tuition myself with a combination of savings, scholarships, and 17-hour work weeks. When I moved out at 19, just 30 minutes away, but a world apart, they called it betrayal. You'll be back within 6 months, my father warned. You think you know better, but you don't. But I didn't come back. I worked. I climbed. I built. And for a long time, I kept them at arm's length until now. I didn't return home in 6 months, or a year, or ever. Instead, I moved into a shared apartment above a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar and espresso every morning. The mattress was thin, the heater unreliable, and the walls paper thin, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture had a story. A couch found on Craigslist for $50, a second-hand desk with one drawer that stuck, a coffee mug from the shop I used to work at that read, "Grind now, rest later." And I took that advice literally. By 20, I was juggling 2 jobs, customer service during the day, IT help desk at night. I enrolled in coding boot camps, took online courses, built a portfolio by working for small local businesses on weekends. I said no to every vacation, every impulse buy, every you deserve a treat coffee. For what? For freedom, for the future, for the house I could walk into and say, "This is mine and no one could take it from me." At 22, I landed my first salary job at a small cybersecurity firm, entry-level but steady. I kept my expenses low, lived with roommates, drove a 2004 Toyota Corolla that rattled at red lights. I cooked pasta in bulk and froze portions. I bought clothes secondhand, and every single paycheck, I transferred 30% directly into a high-yield savings account. No exceptions. I tracked everything. My spreadsheets had color-coded tabs. One for income, one for expenses, one for goals. I knew exactly how many months it would take to reach $400,000, the number I'd set for a down payment plus emergency reserves. I didn't need luxury. I needed peace. And I was building it, brick by digital brick. It was around this time that I met Jessica. We bumped into each other at a tech conference in Raleigh, both reaching for the same USB-C adapter at a vendor booth. We started talking, then coffee, then dinner, then everything. She was bright, fierce, funny in that dry, surgical way that made silence feel like intimacy, not awkwardness. And more importantly, she never once asked what I made or how I spent it. She only asked, "What do you want to build?" A year later, we moved in together. My rent dropped. My expenses fell. My timeline accelerated. She encouraged me to start looking for homes, even though I hadn't quite reached the full $400,000. "The market's changing," she said, practical as always. "Interest rates are decent. You're close enough. Let's just start looking." So we did. Weekends turned into open houses. Google Docs filled with notes and wish lists. A small yard. 3 bedrooms. 1 room that could become my office. A kitchen big enough for her to teach me how not to burn garlic. Then, finally, we found it. A charming craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes outside Charlotte. Original woodwork. Sunlight in every room. And yes, oak cabinetry. I felt it when I stepped inside. Like my life had a spine now. Like I could stop holding my breath. But I wasn't ready for what came next. I didn't tell them about the house. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I knew what they'd say. "It's too soon." "You're not ready." You'll regret tying up your money in real estate. My parents believed adulthood was a performance. You earn the title only if you followed their script. So I kept my silence. Jessica, and I toured the house twice, discussed floor plans, calculated budgets, but I never once shared the address with my parents. I hadn't even saved the listing on any cloud platform. Everything stayed local, private, or so I thought. That's why my father's comment about the oak cabinetry had chilled me. It wasn't a guess. It was a slip. One he tried to cover with vague shrugs, and you must have mentioned it. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. Jessica hadn't either. She was as cautious around my family as I was. I let it go in the moment, but it stuck with me, like a thorn under skin. 3 days later, I received a strange alert from my banking app. New device logged in at 2:15 p.m. My stomach dropped. I hadn't accessed the account that day. I was in a meeting. I checked my balance. Everything looked normal. No missing funds. No suspicious activity. Just that notification. I changed my password anyway. Tightened two-factor authentication. Told myself I was being paranoid. But then it happened again. This time an email. Successful login from unrecognized device. Not once. Twice. I called the bank. A representative named Brandon confirmed logins from multiple IP addresses. Some mobile, some desktop. None are tied to your registered devices, he said. Would you like us to place a temporary freeze? I hesitated. My balance hadn't changed. My accounts looked intact. Still, something felt off. I said yes. That night, I ran a deep malware scan on my phone and laptop. My phone was clean. My laptop wasn't. The scan flagged an unfamiliar process running quietly in the background. A file name I didn't recognize. No icon. No standard installation path. It was stealthy, almost elegant. I called a friend, an ex-colleague who now worked in digital forensics. It's spyware, she said. High level. It records keystrokes, takes screenshots, can even trigger your webcam and mic remotely. She paused. You need to ask yourself, who had access to your computer in the last few months? And that's when it hit me. For months ago, I'd visited my parents. My laptop had been slow. My father missed her. Financial Systems Security offered to clean it up. Just a few optimizations, he'd said. Took it into his home office. Returned it 3 hours later. Faster, smoother, no issues. I'd even thanked him. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a virus. This was planted by my own father. And if he'd seen my keystrokes, he'd seen everything. My passwords, my banking activity, my pre-approval letters, the exact moment I transferred funds, even the name of the mortgage officer Jessica and I had been emailing with. He knew everything. I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I reached for Jessica's tablet. My laptop now felt like a crime scene. I logged into my savings account using her device, bypassing the freeze with a phone verification code. My eyes scanned the screen, hunting for the reassuring number I'd memorized over 10 years of work. $390,000. But it wasn't there. The balance read $0 for a moment. I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page, checked the date, checked the URL. Then I clicked into my transaction history, and there it was, a single wire transfer, executed at 8:41 a.m. the day before. The entire account, every penny, sent to an external recipient whose name appeared in bold black font. Stephen Brooks. The room tilted. My heart thudded in my ears like war drums. I stood frozen, staring at the screen, unable to move or think. Then came the noise, a sound I didn't recognize as mine. Somewhere between a gasp, a sob, and a scream, Jessica rushed over, her eyes wide with alarm. Sienna, what is it? What happened? I turned the tablet around, my voice hollow. It's gone. Everything. The house. The savings. 10 years. Just gone. Jessica took the tablet, scanning the transaction. This has to be fraud, she said, voice sharp. We'll call the bank. They can reverse it. It hasn't been long. But I shook my head. I knew something she didn't. Something that made this worse. It's not fraud, I whispered. It's my father. We tried calling them. No one picked up. Texts went unread. Emails unanswered. I even left voicemails, my voice cracking. This is an emergency. Please, call me back. But by morning, nothing. The silence wasn't innocent. It was a statement. So I got in my car. Jessica offered to come. I told her no. I needed this to be mine. The drive to my childhood home took 40 minutes. Long enough to rehearse every possible scenario. Maybe they'd deny it. Maybe they'd say it was an accident. Maybe they were holding the money for safety. Maybe, just maybe, this could still be salvaged. But somewhere deep down, I already knew. Their betrayal wasn't a misstep. It was a strategy. I parked behind my father's BMW. The house looked the same. Perfectly trimmed lawn, spotless driveway, American flag swaying gently on the porch. I rang the bell with a hand that didn't feel like mine. My mother answered. Her face flickered, surprise, then caution. Sienna, she said, forcing a smile. We weren't expecting you. Everything all right? I didn't answer. Is Dad home? In his study. I walked past her without waiting. Past the foyer. Past the photos on the wall where Evan had always been front and center. Straight into the study. My father looked up, removing his reading glasses. Sienna, he said, like he hadn't stolen my life savings. What brings you by on a weekday? I closed the door behind me. I know what you did. My father didn't flinch. He folded his glasses slowly, placed them on the desk, and leaned back like he was settling into a business meeting. You'll have to be more specific, he said calmly. Behind me, the door opened again. My mother slipped in, closing it softly behind her. Stephen, she said, her voice low, she knows. He nodded once, still looking at me. Sooner than expected. But it doesn't change anything. Yes, I said coldly, it does. You stole my money. You installed spyware on my computer. That's not parenting. That's criminal. My father sighed like I was being dramatic. Sienna, sit down. I didn't move. Where is my money? I asked. It's safe, he said, like that meant anything. We made a decision for the family. No, I snapped. You made a decision about money I earned. Money I saved for 10 years. Without asking. Without even telling me. My mother stepped in then. You're overreacting. We've always done what's best for you, even when you don't see it. I stared at her. I'm 29. I don't need your protection. I needed that money to buy a home. And you took it like it belonged to you. You were about to make a terrible financial mistake, my father said, standing now, towering over me. Investing all your liquid assets into a house in this market? Reckless. Better than funding Evan's startup fantasy, I said, my voice rising despite myself. He froze. How? I cut him off. Don't insult my intelligence. It was wired into an account under your name. I saw it. I traced it. Just then the front door opened. Footsteps. Moments later, Evan appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. What's going on? He asked. You're not supposed to be home today. I turned to him. They stole my money, Evan. $390,000. Everything I saved. They gave it to you. His eyes went wide. What? That's not no. That can't be true. He looked at our parents, waiting for denial. None came. Emily's being selfish as always, my father muttered. We made a choice that benefits all of us. My mother chimed in. You're going to do something great, Evan. This is for your future. Evan looked sick. I didn't ask for this. I don't want her money. They already gave you $50,000, I said quietly. Did you think that came from nowhere? He turned pale. My father exhaled sharply. You'll understand one day. Children don't always see the full picture. No, I said, suddenly calm. But courts do. My mother's mouth opened, then shut. My father's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't press charges against your own parents. Watch me, I said. Then I turned and walked out. The next morning, I filed a police report for theft, unauthorized computer access, and financial fraud. I brought screenshots, bank statements, spyware logs, and a name. Sarah Williams, a civil attorney known for handling family-based financial abuse cases. You're not the first, Sarah told me, flipping through my documents, but you might be one of the most prepared. Let's freeze their assets before they move anything else. The court smelled like paper and anxiety. It was smaller than I expected, more intimate, like someone might accidentally overhear your heartbreak and write it down. I sat beside Sarah at the plaintiff's table, my spine stiff, hands folded tightly in my lap. Across from us, my parents looked perfectly composed. My mother in her pale pink blazer, my father in a tailored navy suit. Their attorney, Bradford Montgomery, was a shark in expensive shoes, known for defending high-net-worth clients and burying inconvenient truths under technicalities. But this time the truth had teeth. Sarah began with no theatrics, just the facts, a timeline of access logs, banking records, and spyware evidence. This is not a case of poor communication, she told the judge. This is targeted digital surveillance, unauthorized financial activity, and a total breach of personal autonomy by the defendant's own daughter's admission, carried out systematically and without consent. Montgomery countered with polished calm. The Brookses are respected members of the community, he said. Their actions were misguided, perhaps, but motivated purely by parental concern. They believed their daughter was making a catastrophic mistake, and they acted to protect her long-term future and the future of their family. Then I took the stand. I spoke clearly, not too fast. I told them about the years of saving, the spreadsheets, the garage sale furniture, the skipped vacations. I described the spyware, the login alerts, the sudden disappearance of $390,000. I never gave them access, I said. I never gave them permission. And I never agreed to fund my brother's startup dreams. Montgomery's cross-examination was sharp. Miss Brooks, are you suggesting your parents had no right to intervene when they believed you were making a dangerous investment? I'm suggesting, I said, meeting his gaze, that believing something doesn't make it legal. He shifted tactics. Would you describe yourself as emotionally reactive? Sarah objected. The judge sustained it. Then came the turning point. The forensic tech, my old colleague, walked the court through the spyware, how it worked when it was installed and what it allowed. This wasn't a parental control app, she explained. This was covert surveillance. It captured keystrokes, passwords, screenshots, even accessed the webcam. It's software typically used in corporate espionage, not households. I watched my father's face twitch as she read out the exact timestamp the software was installed. 3:08 p.m., for months ago, the same day he cleaned up my laptop. Then came Evan. I'd expected him to support me quietly. I didn't expect him to bury our parents on the stand. They've always treated us differently, he said, his voice steady. They gave me freedom, resources, trust. They micromanaged her, controlled her. When I found out they took her money, I told them it was wrong. They didn't care. They said it was their right. He paused, then delivered the blow. They gave me $50,000 and called it a family investment. When I refused and said I'd testify for Sienna, they threatened to pull me out of school. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. My mother made a small, strangled sound. My father stared at the table. The judge leaned forward, visibly disturbed. By the end of that day, Montgomery approached Sarah quietly and requested a recess to discuss settlement. Sarah turned to me. They're scared. I want them to be, I said. But I'm not here for compromise. I'm here for a verdict. The courtroom felt colder the next morning. I wore a black blazer Jessica had helped me pick out, structured, sharp, deliberate. It made me feel less like a daughter and more like someone who'd survived something awful and still showed up anyway. The judge returned, her face unreadable, her voice calm but clipped. In the matter of Brooks versus Brooks, she began, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. I didn't breathe. The evidence provided digital logs, forensic analysis, sworn testimony, and verified financial records. Makes clear that the defendants willfully and unlawfully accessed their adult daughter's private digital communications, installed surveillance software without her consent, and transferred funds from her personal savings account under false pretenses. My mother went pale. My father gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Restitution in the amount of $39,000 is to be returned immediately, with an additional $50,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress, breach of privacy, and financial abuse. A permanent injunction is granted barring the defendants from any future access to the plaintiff's financial institutions, digital devices, or related systems. She paused. Let this be clear. While the parental role confers many responsibilities, it does not override legal or ethical boundaries. Miss Brooks has demonstrated maturity, independence, and responsibility far beyond what this court sees regularly. The violation she suffered was not a mistake. It was a choice, a deeply calculated one. There was a beat of silence, and then it was over. My legs were shaking as I stood. Sarah leaned over and whispered, "That's the most direct ruling I've ever seen in a case like this." I nodded. Because this wasn't just a financial theft, it was identity theft. They tried to erase the version of me that didn't need them. Within days, the payment came through. All $89,000, likely wired out of fear, not remorse. The DA's office chose not to pursue criminal charges, citing full financial restitution and lack of prior record, but the court record remained and the permanent injunction stood. They were legally cut off from my financial life, and emotionally, well, that was another process entirely. Jessica and I resumed our house hunt. The original home had been sold while the legal process dragged on, but we found something better for bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a small vegetable garden out back, a place with light and silence, a place untouched by spyware or secrets. We closed on it in late autumn. I signed the paperwork with a real pen, real paper, and real ownership. Then Jessica took my hand, squeezed it, and said, "Let's fill this place with new things. No ghosts." We spent our first night eating takeout on the floor, champagne in coffee mugs, laughing like two people who had been through a war and lived to tell it. Freedom wasn't abstract anymore. It was measurable. It was this house, these walls, her warmth, my peace, and no one could touch it again. They tried, of course. A week after the verdict, I received an email from my mother. The subject line read, "A fresh start." Inside was a photo of a crystal vase filled with white lilies, my childhood favorite, and a message. "We hope you'll see that everything worked out in the end. Families make mistakes, but love should win." Attached was a gift receipt from a luxury home goods store, addressed to Miss Sienna Brooks, our new home. I didn't reply. Then came my father's voice, unexpectedly, on my voicemail on my birthday. "I've got an investment opportunity for that settlement money. Something low risk, high yield. Thought you'd want to hear it from someone who still cares." I laughed, not out of amusement, but out of disbelief. They hadn't changed. They hadn't learned. In their minds, the court ruling wasn't a reckoning. It was a rough patch, a misunderstanding, something to be polished over with a housewarming gift or financial advice I never asked for. So I did what I'd promised myself I would. I held the line. I established what my therapist called structured contact. That meant no private meetings, no unscheduled visits, no discussions of money, technology, or emotional manipulation. If they crossed those lines, communication ended, and it did more than once. My relationship with Evan, though, grew stronger. He moved into an apartment near his university and started a small tech consulting business, without their money. It's harder this way, he admitted, scraping paint off the guest bedroom wall in our new house, but it feels honest, like I'm finally earning what I build. He apologized again, not for what our parents had done, but for not speaking up sooner, for not seeing it, for not stopping them. I told him he didn't owe me that. But the truth is, it mattered more than he knew. And Jessica, she never once said, "I told you so." Never once questioned the rage, the sadness, the strange numbness that followed even after the money was returned. She just made tea, picked out rugs, helped install the bookshelf that I had dreamed about since I was 19. Then, one evening, she handed me a velvet box on our porch as golden light pooled across the lawn. "I don't know if there's ever a perfect moment," she said softly, "but after everything we've survived, I want the next chapter to have your name written beside mine." Inside was a simple ring, silver, understated, solid. I said yes, not just to her, but to the life we'd fought for, not just in court, but inside myself. A year after the court ruling, I stood in front of a crowded lecture hall at a local community college. The projector behind me showed a single phrase: "Digital boundaries are emotional boundaries." I had just finished sharing my story, not just the spyware or the stolen money, but the deeper violation underneath it all. The feeling of being watched by the people who were supposed to protect me. The confusion of loving people who didn't believe in your right to privacy. The guilt of standing up for yourself and being called ungrateful because of it. Afterward, students lined up to talk. Some with questions about security software, others with tears in their eyes. One young woman whispered, "My stepdad monitors my phone." I didn't even know that was abuse until today. That's when I realized what this really was. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice anymore. It was about naming the thing that so many of us were taught to endure in silence. Control, surveillance, financial dependency disguised as love. It was about turning pain into a tool, so no one else had to be blindsided the way I was. That workshop became a series, then a podcast, then a nonprofit. I partnered with shelters, schools, and tech firms to teach digital autonomy, especially to women, LGBTQ+ youth, and survivors of family abuse. We called it the Firewall Project. Jessica was my first board member. Evan volunteered to teach budgeting and data privacy to teens. We built a home, a literal one with an herb garden and a mismatched couch we both refused to replace, and a figurative one, filled with people who chose us, not out of blood, but out of respect. My parents, they remained distant, civil but distant. We saw each other at weddings, holidays, funerals. We spoke in safe topics, the weather, books, news, but they never mentioned the ruling, or the spyware, or Evan's testimony. It was like they'd sealed off that chapter and labeled it family drama we don't talk about. I didn't need an apology anymore, because what I wanted, more than anything, was something they could never give me: accountability. And I gave it to myself. Dr. Reeves, my therapist, once said, "Forgiveness is choosing to carry less, not pretending it didn't happen." I think about that when I walk past my old laptop, now permanently shut in a desk drawer. When I log into my bank account and see my balance untouched. When I hear Jessica humming in the kitchen, or Evan's voice teaching over Zoom from our guest room. This is what freedom sounds like. This is what peace feels like. And if you're reading this, if you've ever had to set boundaries with people you were told you owe everything to, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they gave you life. They tracked my computer. They traced my bank accounts. But they never figured out how to track my strength. And they never will.